Advent is filled with so many beautiful and wonderful heartwarming messages and symbols. You can just feel the hope. None of those is more famous than the beautiful image of hope and symbolic suggestion that we get in today's first reading. A shoot shall sprout from the stump of Jesse. It's like warm Christmas cookies on a cold, wintry day. You can almost wonder why we didn't come up with the song, "Oh, Advent Stump, oh, Advent Stump." Why didn't it catch on? Well, I suppose the image of the Advent stump doesn't work quite as well as the Christmas tree for providing hope and cheer. It needs a little unpacking. So let me tell you the inside story. The Advent stump. What is Isaiah talking about? Well, the stump of Jesse that we hear in our first reading today, well, it really refers to the family tree of Jesse. You're like, okay, but who's Jesse? Well, Jesse is the father of King David. Now, probably you've heard of King David. He is the most famous king in all of Israel. There really weren't too many good ones, so he's one of them, and that's a pretty big deal. So, the family tree of Jesse. Well, that sounds good, but a stump? Why is it a stump? Well, things didn't go well. In fact, the whole family tree of Jesse, well, God promised that a king of the family of Jesse, of the line of David, would rule forever. Unfortunately, most of the kings weren't too good, and so God had to allow them to be taken over. In fact, the whole kingdom split after Solomon, and then the northern kingdom was exiled, and finally the southern kingdom was also exiled. And when Isaiah is writing, well, they're in exile. And what happened to the line of David, the beautiful family tree of Jesse? Well, the last king of David had all of his sons brought before him by the Babylonians. They killed all his sons, and then just to make sure that that was the last thing he would ever see, they gouged out his eyes and took him a prisoner to Babylon, where he died in exile. So the Advent stump, the stump of Jesse, is referring to the fact that at the time of Isaiah, well, that beautiful family tree of David that was supposed to go on forever, it's just a stump. And for all intents and purposes, it looks, well, super dead. It doesn't look good. How can this be a sign of hope, then? Why an Advent symbol of a stump? It sounds dumb. Well, Isaiah tells us that a shoot will sprout from the stump of Jesse. Now, normally, stumps are dead. Living things don't come from dead things. But God is saying that the stump isn't really dead. After all, he promised a king of the line of David would sit on the throne forever. God is faithful to his promises. So Isaiah is saying, don't forget this. It looks now like things are pretty bad, like that promise of God has not been fulfilled, that God was a liar, that he wasn't going to fulfill his promise, that all that's left is a dead stump of this supposedly ever-living royal tree. Isaiah says, no, a shoot will sprout from the stump of Jesse. Don't give up. Have hope. God is faithful to his promises. Well, he does, in fact, fulfill his promise, because there is a king of David ruling right now, forever, on God's throne. Who is that? Well, to see that God fulfills his promise, not only did the Israelites come back from exile and return to Jerusalem, but one day, several thousand years later, we look coming down from the Mount of Olives, riding a donkey, entering the royal city through the royal gate, a son of David. Hosanna to the Son of David, they sing to Jesus as he enters the city on Palm Sunday. Jesus is the fulfillment of this prophecy of Isaiah. A shoot will sprout from the stump of Jesse. The family tree of Jesse is not dead. God has not forgot his promise. A king will come. He's born in Bethlehem, the royal city, and 33 years later, he enters the royal city. Hosanna to the Son of David. Jesus is the fulfillment of that prophecy. He really does rule on God's throne forever. And so the Advent stump, it's a great sign of hope. And maybe in a lot of ways, your life right now feels like God has abandoned you. Maybe your life, that beautiful gift of grace, feels like a stump. Maybe it looks dead. Maybe you too think that God has forgot his promises to you. Maybe he doesn't really care. Oh, Advent stump, oh, Advent stump. Yeah, Don't give in to the doubt. Don't give in to despair. God is faithful to his promises. Even if your life looks like a stump right now, hear God's words to you from Isaiah today. A shoot will sprout from the stump of Jesse. God was faithful then. He'll be faithful to you now. This isn't the end. Hold out. Your life is not a dead stump. A shoot will sprout. God will be faithful to you, just as he was faithful to the Israelites. Have that hope today, brothers and sisters, and God bless you.